What's going on, guys? Hope all is well. Working on this flash sheet here, and this video is just gonna be spit shading and my technique for going about that. All right, so these designs are all originally designed by Sailor Jerry. If you're starting out painting flash, I recommend that you start with Sailor Jerry designs and not someone else's interpretation of that, but the original Sailor Jerry designs. So I'm working out of Sailor Jerry's Volume 1 here. That's my reference. So if you're new to this, you absolutely should be referencing stuff, specifically from, in my opinion, Sailor Jerry. That's what I'm doing currently. And as I've gotten the hang of painting flash, I've moved on to making my own designs and also repainting some other tattooers' designs that are different style from this. But if you're wanting to learn how to paint flash, if you're wanting to become an apprentice specifically in the traditional style, you need to start out by replicating Sailor Jerry's work. And don't go on Pinterest just typing in Sailor Jerry designs. You need to find the hard print references, and you need to be collecting those. If you want to become a tattooer, you have to already have that in motion. You can't just paint still lifes and then think that you're going to be able to just switch over to painting and tattooing American traditional. It doesn't translate at all. But the easiest way to get the hang of it and to know how to do it correctly, or to have a correct foundation, in my opinion, is to start with Sailor Jerry. And like I said, I'm only 2 years in, so if there's any more seasoned artists out there who disagree or know of someone that would be better to study in the beginning, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But in my experience, it's been easiest to get my hands on Sailor Jerry flash. Also, because it's been replicated so many times, I don't really feel like I'm ripping anybody off. And there's a reason it's been replicated so many times, because this is the foundation of American modern electric tattooing, in my opinion, from what I've gathered so far. Yeah, you can go a little bit further back, and there's plenty of other people to credit for many other contributions. But when it comes to painting flash, I think, for me, Sailor Jerry is the one that just hits the mark. So that's what we're doing here. We're learning from the masters. And I have an Ed Hardy book that I study from as well. If you watched my last video, I was doing a video lining a sheet for that, from that. So I'm using watercolor brushes I have one for the black ink and then one for water, and I have a little etching in there so that I know that's just for water. And then I have a cup of water. I used to use my spit. I don't anymore. Spit does have a great consistency to it, that water can be a little bit too loose and it can get a little bit messy. I've heard some people say that they prefer warm water over cold water. I don't really know. I've just gotten to the point where, one, I've practiced enough times that I've got pretty good damage control, and two, I have loosened up and I just don't really care that much for it to be absolutely perfectly executed. Mistakes do happen, and the reason I paint flash isn't necessarily to create a masterpiece. It's to study and learn and feel free to make mistakes and learn how to fix my mistakes on paper, so that when I do work on it on skin, I'm not having to make some of these mental decisions, because that takes away from your decision-making capability in the moment, which takes away from your attention and also opens you up for more risk. Because if you made a mistake on paper and you know it didn't work, you're not going to be inclined to try that on skin. But if you didn't try it on paper, you might feel more risky. You might feel like you want to try it on somebody's skin, and somebody's skin is that's a person. You know, that's, I think, and this is kind of a hot take, but a lot of this like Instagram tattooing that I see, like meme tattoos and stuff, it concerns me a little bit, because that's on you forever. You're a person, you're a human being. And some of this stuff, it just seems a little bit like, I mean, I would call it irresponsible, but also like self degrading in a way. And a lot of it's done really poorly, because it gets traction on Instagram. People like it. And to me, that's a little bit concerning, because I mean, that's just, I don't know. You could say that about any tattoo, I suppose. You know, why would you mark your body permanently? So to each his own. But I just feel like you need to practice certain things on paper, because you have a responsibility to that person to give them something that's gonna adorn their body. And I don't know, I personally believe that there's some things that just shouldn't be tattooed. I think it's okay that some things aren't tattooable, shouldn't be tattooed. Not a good idea. I think that's totally okay. And for me, one of the reasons why I believe still in traditional flash is because it's been tried and true all this time. It holds up good over time if done well. Through all the trends, it's stuck around. And there's a reason for that. And what's the point in trying to reinvent the wheel, especially if you're someone that doesn't even draw? You're not going to create anything spectacular. Doing memes and stuff is not it's not adding anything to the art form. And it's just irresponsible, in my opinion. But a lot of people like that stuff. So that's their body, their choice, their artist, all that. This is just what I do. So a lot of people will lay water down before they lay the black down and then fade off of that. But sometimes that gets a little too messy. It's hard to see how much you've wet the paper. It's also a little bit difficult to see how much water your brush is holding. And so that's why I said that spit shading is really difficult, because there's a lot of factors that go into it. And once again, I see videos all the time on Instagram of people painting flash, and they make it look so easy, so effortless, and I guess that's what mastery looks like. But nobody really tells you the truth of how difficult this is. These designs are really difficult to execute, actually. The thing about traditional tattooing is if there's a discrepancy in the line, you're going to see it. If the fade isn't clean, you're going to be able to see it. So I had this part of the paper was still wet when I laid down that black. And so I keep a little paper towel next to me the whole time to manage the water on this brush, to manage how much water is in that brush, and then also to clean up any mistakes. So one of the skills of painting flash that I've come to learn, I guess, is that mistakes are inevitable because you're working with water and ink, and there's so many variables that it just happens. So learning how to hide your mistakes is a whole nother skill set that comes with this, because it's ink. There's no going back. A lot of people use watercolor, and you can re-wet it, but I use India ink. I think it lays cleaner. I think it looks bolder, all that. And in my opinion, it's more difficult than watercolor because you're really on a time crunch. I use P.H. Martin's. This black is called Black Star. They make two kinds. They have a high carb and a matte. I'm not really sure what the difference is. I've used both, but right now I'm using the matte. So one thing I feel that I should say is that it definitely looks cleaner on camera than it does in person. And so if you're feeling discouraged when you're painting Flash, maybe just take a picture of it and see how it looks on camera. And whenever you're on the internet and you see some Flash, try and really pay as much attention as you can, because it might not actually be as clean as it appears. Instagram is so deceiving in so many ways, and that's one of the reasons why I prefer to hand paint my Flash also, is because it's so much easier to make a digital rendering of something. Especially with AI, and I mean, there's just so many tools to help you out when you're working digitally. You can go over it as many times as you want, all that kind of stuff. But on paper, you can't deny it. And so, to me, that not only refines my skill as an artist in general, because these skills, translate to other areas, but to me, it also gives my clients a little bit more, it gives me a little bit more credibility. Like, yeah, my tattoos look good, but for the people who only see stuff on Instagram, when they come into the shop and they see my hand-painted Flash, at least they can have the security in knowing that I can paint my own designs. I know how to draw, I know how to use those tools. So it's kind of like, well, if you can use those tools, okay, at least it's kind of like there's something there. But if you go into a shop and all you see is just like stencils and pictures of tattoos, I mean, how do you know those pictures aren't edited, especially now with AI? So the only real credibility that you have these days as a tattoo artist is your work in person, which, unless it's a referral from somebody, when somebody comes into your shop, they really don't know how your work looks. They know what they see on Instagram. But I've had people who see something on Instagram and they didn't realize that it was that small or large, I've also had clients that have come in to get cover-ups because they saw someone's Instagram, they saw a flash sale that they were having, and it was all digital stuff, and their tattoo looked terrible. So that, to me, is why Flash is always going to be important, because it showcases that you're studying tattooing in your free time also. You're not just going in trying to make it work. You know how it works because you've done the studying. And for newbies like me, I think studying is extremely important. I don't really understand how people do a 1-year apprenticeship and think that they don't need to be studying anything anymore. All specialized fields that I know of, that I've heard of, require extensive study. I mean, extensive study. To become a doctor, you know how long it takes to become a doctor? I'm not comparing what we do to becoming a doctor, but this is a trade, but it's not a trade, it's an art. A trade, you just need to learn how to execute the technique properly. You need to know how to diagnose the problem, provide the solution properly. And that's about it, you know. But tattooing, there's a whole history involved. And it is an art. And in art school, you have to learn art history. You have to learn so much. You don't graduate art school in a year. And people who become highly successful artists, and I'm not talking about highly successful because they got corporate sponsorships and sold out like that. I mean people who had running legacies in the art world. Extensive studying, it never ended. So if you're thinking of becoming a tattoo artist and you think you're just gonna get to doodle all the time and just settle right into your style, then I don't think tattooing is for you. You should go get a graphic design job or try and start a small business selling your art on Instagram, because tattooing is different and it requires a dedication to it that's not about you, because it's really not. You're just here to provide a service. That's what makes it a trade. But it makes it an art because you're making something unique for someone's body. And that comes with a huge responsibility. And part of honoring that responsibility is through your practice and what you do when you're not tattooing, because it all goes together. So here's a cool technique too that I might try out eventually on some other pieces, but it's called dry brushing, and you can get a pretty decent fade when the brush that you're using to apply the ink, when the ink is a little bit less wet, you can kind of like whip it and get a similar effect to like using a mag. So like down here, I can kind of whip it in. And so you still get a pretty nice fade, but you didn't have to use any water on it. So that's kind of cool. It's a little bit more of a textured fade. But one thing I will say too is practice when you're doing flash, when you're painting flash. Start out by just doing spit shading correctly, learning how to do spit shading correctly. But you want to learn your tools like an instrument. You don't want to get stuck in a box and just do the same scale over and over and over again. So every once in a while, let yourself do something crazy. You know, don't worry so much about making a flash sheet that's gonna look perfect and people are gonna want to buy prints and have that tattooed on them. Like, there's a place for that for sure, but also remember that painting Flash is for study and expansion and growth as an artist, and you can't really do that without letting yourself make mistakes and trying things that don't feel normal or right or whatever. Alright, so we're getting close to finishing up on this spit shading. Also, starting out, you should do it as spit shading just to really hone in on what it's like to be an old school, rugged, rough tattooer. Don't be afraid to be a little bit gross. Like, it's cool, it's fine. So I lay down my black, get my water brush, go over it one time, fade it out, and then I go back to the end of that fade and pull it from there too. And then I just kind of go back over it and feather. Try and make it as smooth as I can. And one thing I want to just like touch on as well is I know I'm new to this, and I know that there's a lot of people out there who have been doing this for a long time that may do it differently, and also who may not agree with me putting this video out there. But I just want to say that one of the reasons why I do this, first of all, is it helps me stay accountable to painting, and also by talking about it, it just does something to my brain that sort of helps me realize what I need to be focusing on, and it actually kind of helps me learn while I'm doing this. Also, last point, there are people who are making content anyway, and they're just showing off their outfits and stuff and giving tutorials on how to use a cartridge or whatever. So all I can say is it could be worse. You know, like, don't be mad at me for just throwing out some pointers about how to paint Flash, because honestly, this type of video, unless you're pretty serious about being a tattooer and flash painter, you're probably not going to make it to the end. So for whatever reason you're still sitting here, then I mean, you probably deserve to hear what I have to say about how to do this. So I wish you guys luck out there on your journey. And that was Spit Shading, a Sailor Jerry flash sheet from his volume 1. Take care.